You're standing by your flower bed right now, a scoop of feed in your hand, thinking one more dose will keep the blooms coming. Put it down. That single scoop in August is the fastest way to lose the very flowers you have waited all summer to see. Here is the truth almost nobody tells you. In late summer, the wrong fertilizer does not feed your plants, it punishes them. It pushes soft, weak growth that never blooms, invites disease, and leaves your roses, your hydrangeas, and your salvias too exhausted to make it through the cold. I learned this the hard way, one August years ago. When I fed my prize climbing rose the same thing. I fed it in spring and watched it throw out floppy green shoots instead of a single new bud. By the time I understood what I had done, the season was over. Stay with me, because the Royal Horticultural Society has been quietly pointing to a better late summer feed for decades, one that Victorian gardeners swore by, and I'm going to show you exactly what to use instead before this narrow August window closes. And this works whether you planted last spring or you have babied the same rose bush for 20 years. Let me start with the fertilizer sitting in almost every garden shed in America and Britain right now, because this is the one that quietly does the most damage in August. I am talking about the standard all-purpose plant food, the bright blue crystals you dissolve in a watering can, the ones with a big number on the front for fast, lush growth. In spring, that feed is a gift. Your plants are waking up, they are hungry, they want to grow, and all that nitrogen gives them the green leaves and strong stems they need. But we are not in spring anymore. That is the whole point. In August, your ornamental plants have shifted their entire purpose. They are no longer trying to get bigger. They are trying to finish. They are ripening their wood, setting next year's buds, and slowly drawing their energy down toward the roots where it needs to be stored for winter. When you hit them with a heavy dose of nitrogen right now, you interrupt that natural shift. You force the plant to snap back into growth mode at the worst possible time. Here is what that looks like in your own garden, and you may be seeing it right now without knowing what it means. Your rose puts out a long, whippy shoot with soft, pale leaves and no flower at the end of it. Your hydrangea grows taller and leafier, but the blooms stop coming. Your salvia flops open in the middle and refuses to stand up straight. That soft growth is the giveaway. Nitrogen in August tells the plant to build leaves instead of flowers, and it builds them fast and weak. The tissue is thin, full of water, and it has no time to harden before the nights turn cold. That is the soft growth that mildew loves, that aphids swarm, and that the first real chill turns to blackened mush. The Royal Horticultural Society is very clear on this point. They recommend stopping high nitrogen feeds on roses and many flowering shrubs by late summer, because feeding past that window produces growth that simply cannot ripen in time. So if you take nothing else from me today, take this. That blue all-purpose feed goes back on the shelf until next spring. But putting it down is only half the battle, because there is a second product doing damage right at the edge of your borders, and most people never connect it to their dying blooms. That second one is lawn feed. More specifically, the weed and feed products. So many of us spread across the grass in mid to late summer to keep the lawn green and knock back the dandelions. I understand the temptation completely. The lawn is right there next to your beds. The bag says summer feed, and it feels efficient to do the whole garden in one afternoon. But here is the problem, and it is a big one. Lawn fertilizer is designed to do one thing above all else, and that is to push leaf growth. Grass is nothing but leaves, so lawn feed is loaded with nitrogen, often far more concentrated than anything you would ever put on a flower. When those granules land in your border, or when the feed washes off the lawn edge during a rain and seeps into the soil where your plant's roots are reaching, your ornamentals get that same nitrogen overdose, except stronger. I have seen a whole row of perennials go leafy and bloomless because the sprinkler carried lawn feed 6 inches into the bed. And the weed killer, half of weed and feed, is even worse. Those products contain selective herbicides meant to kill broadleaf plants while leaving grass alone. Guess what your beloved flowers are? Broadleaf plants. Every rose, every hydrangea, every clematis, every hosta in your garden is exactly the kind of plant those chemicals are formulated to attack. University Extension Services in the United States warn every single year about drift and root uptake from weed and feed damaging ornamental beds, and the symptoms are heartbreaking. Twisted, cupped leaves, distorted new growth, stems that curl in on themselves for no reason you can see. People spend weeks thinking they have a disease or a pest, when the real culprit was the lawn treatment they applied 30 feet away. So here is my rule, and I follow it religiously. I keep at least a 3-foot buffer between any lawn feed and my flower beds, and in August I simply skip the weed and feed near my borders altogether. The lawn can wait, the blooms cannot. Now, you might be thinking that the natural organic options are safe, that if you avoid the chemicals, you are in the clear. I wish that were true, because the next one is something gardeners reach for precisely because they think it is the gentle, old-fashioned choice. I am talking about fresh manure. There is a romance to it, isn't there? The picture of the wise old gardener barrowing well-rotted muck onto the beds, the smell of the countryside, the sense that you are doing things the honest, traditional way, and properly composted manure dug in during autumn or winter truly is one of the finest things you can give your soil. But fresh manure in August is a completely different animal, and it can wreck a plant in ways that shock people. First, fresh manure is extremely high in nitrogen, and we have already talked about what a nitrogen surge does in late summer. It slams your plants back into that soft, floppy, bloomless growth right when they should be settling down. But fresh manure carries a second danger that catches even experienced gardeners off guard. As it breaks down, it releases ammonia and generates heat, and that combination can chemically burn the roots and stems of anything it touches. I once watched a neighbor mound fresh, stable manure around the base of her hydrangeas in high summer, certain she was giving them a treat, and within 2 weeks the lower leaves had scorched brown and the whole plant sulked for the rest of the year. There is also the matter of what modern manure often carries with it, and this is something the older gardening books never had to warn about. Some manure today contains traces of persistent herbicides, weed killers that pass through the animal after it ate treated hay, and these chemicals can survive composting and devastate broadleaf ornamentals. Tomato growers have reported entire crops ruined by contaminated manure, with the same telltale curling and twisting you get from lawn weed killer. So, my advice on manure is simple, and it comes straight from decades of watching this go wrong. If you want to use manure, and it is wonderful stuff, save it for late autumn or winter. Make absolutely certain it is well rotted and crumbly, with no ammonia smell, and never pile it against the stems of a living plant. In August, keep it far away from your borders. Now, if you have been feeding your plants any of these things this summer, and you are starting to feel a knot in your stomach, I want you to stay with me, because in just a moment I am going to show you exactly how to rescue a plant that has already been pushed too hard. But first, there is a fourth product, and this one hides behind the word natural to fool careful, conscientious gardeners. That fourth one is blood meal, and its cousins, the fast-acting high-nitrogen organic feeds. Now, I have real respect for blood meal in the right season. It is a genuine, time-honored organic fertilizer, and in early spring, it can green up a hungry plant faster than almost anything else natural. But that speed is exactly the problem in August. Blood meal is one of the most concentrated sources of nitrogen you can buy, organic or not, and it releases that nitrogen quickly. So while it wears the friendly label of an organic, natural product, in late summer it behaves almost identically to that bright blue chemical feed we started with. It shouts at your plant to grow, grow, grow at the precise moment your plant needs to be told to rest, ripen, and prepare. I made this exact mistake in my early years, thinking that because blood meal was natural, it was somehow gentle and safe to use anytime. I side-dressed my delphiniums with it in mid-August one year, feeling very virtuous about it, and I got a jungle of soft, leafy growth and a mildew problem that took over the whole clump within a month. The lesson I finally absorbed is that the word natural on a bag tells you nothing about when to use it. What matters is what the fertilizer does inside the plant and whether that action fits the season. A fast nitrogen hit fits April. It does not fit August. The same goes for those liquid seaweed and nitrogen tonics, and the general purpose organic granules that promise lush growth. If the main promise on the front of the bag is growth, greenness, or size, that is your signal to leave it alone until spring returns. In late summer, we are not chasing size. We are protecting what we already have and setting up next year's flowers. And this brings me to the fertilizer that surprises people the most, because it does not even do its damage today. It does its damage slowly, quietly, over the next 2 months, long after you have forgotten you applied it. I am talking about the slow-release granular feeds, the little coated pellets you scatter and forget, the ones that promise to feed your plants for 3, 4, even 6 months from a single application. In spring, those are a genuine convenience, and I use them myself when the season is right. But think carefully about the timing. If you scatter a 4-month slow-release feed in early August, you have just programmed your plants to keep receiving a steady drip of nitrogen straight through September, October, and into November. You have set a fuse that burns right into the heart of autumn, the exact time your plants most need to stop growing and harden off. Every warm spell will trigger another little flush of that soft, tender growth, and every one of those flushes will be caught out and blackened by the first frost. The plant pours its stored energy into growth it can never keep, and it goes into winter depleted instead of rested. That is how a perfectly healthy shrub can look fine in October and then die back shockingly hard over winter. And the gardener never connects it to the tidy handful of pellets scattered back in August. If that thought just made your stomach drop a little, hold on to it, because this is exactly the moment I want to talk to you. Knowing the 5 wrong feeds is one thing, but knowing every single plant's own signals all year round is a different level of peace of mind, and that is exactly what the Old Gardener's Rescue Secrets is built for. Inside, you get the full diagnostic system that reads any sick plant in about 5 minutes, so you can tell thirst from overwatering and finally decode yellowing leaves clue by clue, plus the seasonal pruning map that tells you the one right moment for every cut, from rose deadheading to that narrow peony window most people miss. Here is something you can check tonight for free, no book needed. Go look at one plant you fed this summer and see if you spot that soft, pale, whippy growth we just talked about. If you do, you already know it needs potassium, not nitrogen. And that is the diagnostic mindset this whole collection trains into you for every plant you own. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Autumn is coming for every one of us, no matter where we garden, and the plants that go into it depleted are the ones that struggle to come back. So the sooner you know how to read them, the more of them you keep. Now let's get back to that fuse burning quietly in your soil, because I still need to show you the exact fix for the clock on that bag. The fix here is all about reading the clock on the bag. Look at how long the slow release feed claims to work. Count that many months forward from today. And if that lands you deep into autumn or winter, do not apply it now. Horticultural guidance across both the United States and Britain lines up on this. Stop feeding nitrogen to woody and perennial ornamentals roughly 6 to 8 weeks before your first expected frost, so that the plant has time to firm up its growth. For most of us, that means the nitrogen feeding is finished by the middle of August at the very latest, and in colder regions even earlier. So those coated pellets, as handy as they are, belong to spring and very early summer, not to now. Now, I promised I would come back to those of you who are looking at a plant that has already been pushed, already gone soft and leafy, maybe already showing signs of stress, and who are worried it is too late. This next part is for you especially, so lean in. If you have an established plant, something you have grown for years, a rose you planted when you moved into the house, a hydrangea that was your mother's, a clematis that has climbed the same trellis for a decade, and you have been feeding it the wrong things this summer, I want to take that worry off your shoulders right now. It is almost never too late in August to change course, and an established plant with a deep, mature root system is far more forgiving than a young one. Here is exactly what I do to rescue a plant that has been overfed and pushed into that soft, floppy, vulnerable state. The very first step is to stop all feeding immediately, not next week, today. You cannot pull the nitrogen back out of the soil, but you can stop adding to it, and that alone begins the recovery. The second step is to water deeply and slowly, a long soak at the base of the plant. This does something important. It helps flush excess nitrogen salts down through the soil and away from the shallow feeding roots, easing that chemical pressure on the plant. I give an overfed shrub a good, long, slow drink 2 or 3 times over the following week, letting the water sink deep rather than splashing the leaves. The third step is the one that feels counterintuitive but works beautifully. Cut back the softest, weakest growth. Those long, pale, whippy shoots that will never flower and will never harden in time, take your clean secateurs and remove them. I know it feels wrong to cut a plant that is already stressed, but you are doing it a kindness. You are telling it to stop pouring energy into growth it cannot keep. and you are redirecting that energy back toward the roots and the wood that will actually survive. On a rose, I take those soft, blind shoots back to a firmer, woodier section of stem. On a floppy perennial, I thin out the weakest stems at the base. The plant looks a little sparser for a week or two, and then something wonderful happens. It steadies. The remaining growth firms up. The color deepens. And here is the part that gives me the most satisfaction after decades of doing this. A mature plant that you rescue in mid-August, that you stop overfeeding, flush, and gently prune, will very often reward you with a proper flush of late blooms in September, the flowers it was too distracted to make when it was busy growing soft leaves. I have brought back roses that looked hopeless in the first week of August and had them blooming beautifully by the middle of September. Your established plants have reserves and resilience that young ones simply do not, and that is exactly why they are worth saving. But rescuing a plant is only half of what August can do for you, because there is a way to actively push your plants toward their strongest, most abundant blooms right now, and it comes from a source almost everyone has forgotten. Here is the secret I promised you. The one thing that separates a garden that merely survives August from one that erupts into flower. And it is the exact opposite of everything we have been told to reach for. Instead of feeding nitrogen in late summer, you feed potassium. Potassium, sometimes called potash, is the nutrient that does not chase leafy growth at all. Instead, it does three things your plants desperately want in August. It fuels the formation of flowers, it ripens and hardens the wood and stems so they can survive winter, and it improves the plant's own resistance to cold and disease. This is why experienced rose growers and the guidance from the Royal Horticultural Society point to sulfate of potash as the late summer feed for roses and flowering shrubs, applied as the main flush fades, to firm up growth and encourage the buds that carry into next year. A single light dressing of sulfate of potash, gently worked into the soil surface around the base of the plant and watered in, does the opposite of that soft nitrogen growth. It tells the plant, quietly and correctly, that the season is turning, that now is the time to flower and then to rest. But here's where the story gets richer, because the traditional gardeners knew a way to deliver that potassium for nothing, straight from a plant growing wild at the bottom of the garden, and this is the piece that has been buried under 100 years of shiny fertilizer packaging. The plant is comfrey. That big, coarse, bristly plant with the drooping purple and cream flowers that so many people yank out as a weed is one of the finest natural sources of potassium a gardener can have. Its deep roots mine potassium and other minerals from far down in the subsoil and store them in those big leaves. And here is the verifiable anchor that makes this real rather than folklore. In Britain, a gardener named Lawrence Hills devoted his life to studying comfrey and founded the Henry Doubleday Research Association, named after the Victorian smallholder who first championed the plant in the 1870s. Hills carefully documented and promoted a particular strain of Russian comfrey called Bocking 14, prized precisely because it is so rich in potassium and does not spread and seed itself everywhere. Careful organic growers have kept this knowledge alive for generations while the rest of the world reached for the plastic bottle. And making comfrey feed is almost absurdly simple, which is exactly why the marketing world let it be forgotten. You cut a good armful of comfrey leaves, you pack them into a bucket, you weigh them down and cover them, and you leave them for a few weeks to break down into a dark liquid. That liquid is strong, so you dilute it heavily, roughly 1 part comfrey liquid to 10 or 15 parts water, until it looks like weak tea, and you water it around the base of your flowering plants. It is high in potassium and low in nitrogen, which is precisely the balance your roses, your hydrangeas, your dahlias, and your late perennials are crying out for in August. This is the same principle behind why so many old-timers fed their tomatoes and their roses the same way, because both want potassium to flower and fruit rather than nitrogen to grow leaves. If you have no comfrey and no time to brew it, a tomato feed from the garden center follows the very same logic, high in potassium and low in nitrogen, and you can use it on your flowering ornamentals right now to exactly the same effect. That is the hidden switch. Not more food, different food. The moment you stop feeding growth and start feeding flowers and resilience, your whole late summer garden changes character. So let me put the whole picture together for you, simply so you can walk outside this weekend and act on it. The 5 things to keep away from your ornamental beds in August are the high nitrogen all-purpose feed, the lawn weed and feed near your borders, fresh manure against your plants, fast-acting blood meal and its high nitrogen organic cousins, and any long-lasting slow-release granule whose feeding window runs deep into autumn. Every one of those pushes soft, doomed growth at the exact moment your plants need to ripen and rest. And the one thing to reach for instead is potassium, whether that is a light dressing of sulfate of potash, a diluted homemade comfrey feed carrying on the work that Lawrence Hills and the Henry Doubleday Research Association documented, or a simple high potassium tomato feed. That single shift, made in the next week or two while the window is still open, is what stands between a plant that limps into winter exhausted and one that gives you a final glorious flush of flowers and comes back stronger next spring. I want you to remember the feeling of that rose I nearly lost all those years ago, floppy and bloomless and my own fault, and then the feeling the year I finally got it right, the year the September blooms came thick, and the plant sailed through winter without a scratch. That is the difference we are talking about. Not a difficult skill, not an expensive product, just knowing what to put down and what to pick up, and doing it in the right narrow window of the year. You are the kind of gardener who does not give up on a plant you have poured years of love into, and now you have the one piece of timing that most people never learn. So tell me, which plant are you going to save first this August? Is it a rose, a hydrangea, a clematis, a bed of dahlias? Type it in the comments right now and tell me where in the world you are gardening from, because our timing shifts with our climate and I read every single one. Do not just think it, actually leave the comment, because it helps me know exactly what you are growing. And if you refuse to let your favorite plants die from the same bad advice that fooled me for years, come join us, because that is who this little community is for. Stay close, because next time I am going to show you the one thing you must do to your hydrangeas in early autumn to guarantee next summer's flower heads. And getting it wrong is why so many people get all leaves and no blooms the following year. Before you go, here's what comes next. This video showed you what to avoid, but inside the Blooming Garden Circle, I walk you through the exact late summer feed right where we left off. Ask me your own question and I answer you myself, not a machine. You won't be alone here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen and cancel any time with one click. I'm Mary and I'd love to see you there. Now, if you already have a plant that's struggling or looking half gone, don't give up on it just yet. The next video shows you one simple way to bring almost any plant back to life. It's starting right here,